What's up guys, welcome to today's video. We're going to be doing a beginner friendly glute workout, so we're going to be isolating the glutes. If you haven't watched the first part of this 3-part video series, make sure you go and do that. It is a activation / warm-up routine, so we want to make sure our glutes are activating and firing correctly before we get started. Once you complete that, then we can start the workout. These bands right here are going to be our best friend today. They're going to really help us activate our outer glutes, and the whole point of them is to cue you to like push your knees apart, and that'll hit your outer glutes really well. So this will basically be your best friend for the workout. You can either pick a medium, a light, or a heavy depending on your glute strength and skill level. So like I said, this is a beginner friendly workout. We're not going to be doing anything with heavy barbells or really difficult movements where you're prone to hurting yourself. We're going to do all simple stuff where you can kind of go with your skill level and scale up as you get better. So with that, let's get started with some hip thrusts. Welcome to the workout, everyone. Like I said, this is going to be a beginner-friendly workout. If you are not a beginner and you're more advanced, you can definitely still do this workout. It still kicked my butt. All you have to do is scale it up to your skill level, up to your strength. You're getting really quality contractions. Push yourself with weights and shortened rest times, and I promise it will still be super hard. So don't be afraid to do this if you're not a beginner. If you are a beginner, then these tips are going to be super helpful for you. So this first exercise, as you've been watching, is a dumbbell hip thrust, again with the band around the knees. With this one, I really like using the dumbbell because A, you don't have to set up a barbell, which is honestly really inconvenient. It's a lot more comfortable. You don't need to put a pad on your hips or anything, and it's just easier. However, you do need to go like higher reps because your weight is lower, and therefore you need to do higher reps with a lower weight to get the same amount of volume. So keep that in mind, but I do like throwing this in on my higher volume days. So you want to have your upper back resting on a bench that is about knee height for you, and when you lower down, think about loading your hips down and back towards the bench, and then when you thrust up, your shins should be perpendicular to the floor, and you should think about tucking your glutes under. So think about making your butt really ugly and squeezing it really hard at the top, tucking those glutes under. And you don't want to be feeling too much quad activation. You should be feeling mostly glutes and a little bit of hamstrings. If you are not feeling that, kind of experiment with the way that either the dumbbell's positioned, the way you're squeezing, your foot positioning. Just play around. A big part of having successful glute workouts is experimenting with what works for you. Everyone has slightly different biomechanics. Everyone has different cues that work for them. So try a variety of things, and eventually you will find the sweet spot for what works best for you. Next up, we have some leg presses. Again, I'm using the ProSource resistance band around my knees. That will be linked in the description down below. And ProSource is also sponsoring this video, just so you guys know. For this exercise, I like to keep the resistance band on. Again, I like to keep my feet in the middle / the top half of the platform. That helps me be in an optimal position to be using my glutes more as well. I like to keep my feet kind of wide, and that also adds to the outer glute activation. For this, I supersetted it with some calf raises on the leg press. This is just an easy way to get some sets of calves in. I oftentimes forget to do calves at the end of my leg workouts. I'm majorly guilty of that, but doing them on the leg press is just quick and easy. By the way, everything in this workout was 3 sets of 12 to 15, and then this was a superset, which means that I did both exercises back to back with no rest until I finished the second exercise. So 3 sets of 12 to 15. You can do this on any leg press, but this type is my favorite. No matter what type you're using, you really want to take your time and establish that mind-muscle connection so that you're pushing up through your glutes and really using them to power through the movement. For me, this one is an easy one for my quads to take over, so make sure you're not going too heavy. The number one mistake I made early on in trying to build my glutes was constantly trying to go as heavy as possible, and what that really ended up doing was making my quads take over for every exercise. So if you feel that happening, then don't be afraid to drop the weight and really focus on establishing that mind-muscle connection. That's super important. Another thing to note about these calf presses is that I alternated my toe positioning. So I did one set with my feet parallel, one set with my toes in, and one set with my toes out, just to target kind of different fibers within my calf muscles. After the leg press, I moved on to doing some stiff leg deadlifts with dumbbells. This exercise is always a staple in my glute workouts. There are a few keys to this one. The number one key is to think about sitting back with your hips. You're not just bending over like you're doing a hamstring stretch, for example. You really want to sink your hips back and push your hips as far back as possible, and that will stretch out your hamstrings. And then when you stand back up, you want to think about squeezing your glutes first and using your glutes and your hamstrings to stand all the way up. This is not a lower back exercise, and you should not be feeling much tension in your back. In order to keep your back safe, you want to make sure you're keeping a neutral spine, which means that your head and neck are in line with your back. As you can see, I'm not craning my head up to look in the mirror. I'm keeping my head exactly in line with where my back is. So your gaze will go up and down as you go through each rep. I performed these with the band around my knees again. If you're more of a beginner, I would suggest not having the band around your knees because it can get in the way. This is a trickier movement to really get the right contraction during. So if you are not super confident with your form, super confident with your ability to isolate your glutes and hamstrings, then I would suggest not doing it with the band, or at least put the band much lower so that you're not having any interference between the dumbbells and the band. And on my last set, you can see I actually took it off because for me, I found it distracting. So don't worry about it if you don't want to use the band for this exercise. Similar to the hip thrust, you want to think about tucking your glutes under with each rep and really feel that contraction before sinking your hips back for the next one. After those stiff leg deadlifts, I moved on to doing some bench step-ups. I would recommend using a box or not a padded bench, especially if you're more of a beginner, because it does add a factor of instability, which makes it harder to balance, and it made me a little wobbly if you can notice it in this clip. So I would recommend finding like a aerobic step or something like that. But the main keys for this exercise are 1, to push through your heel with the top foot in order to really engage that glute. 2, keep your chest up nice and tall. And 3, try not to use your back foot to help you step up. You should really be putting as much weight as possible in that top foot, and that also goes along with pushing through your heel. You'll notice that I also chose to drive my non-working knee through at the top, and this just helps maximize that glute contraction. Your working glute is the one that is attached to the leg that is on the bench, so that should be where you're really feeling the burn. You should not be using your non-working leg you should be using it as little as possible and really just using it to stabilize. You may also find that it's easier to do this with either a barbell on your back or holding a dumbbell in just one hand. You could hold a kettlebell at your chest. There are a lot of different ways that you can apply the load to this exercise and make it easier to balance. For this one, I did actually just do 3 sets of 10 on each leg instead of 12 to 15 because this is a very taxing exercise, and since you're doing it unilaterally, so one side at a time, it is very tiring, and I was only using 10 pounds in each hand, as you guys can see, and it was difficult. So make sure you are challenging yourself, but also maintaining good form and staying safe. Your bench height is going to be dependent on your skill level, your confidence with this movement. As you can see, this bench is about knee height for me. technically the higher the bench, the more glute activation you're going to be getting, but that's also dependent on your mobility, your flexibility, your strength, all of those things, because if you cannot safely use a very high step, then obviously you're not going to be getting very good glute contraction. So definitely don't sacrifice good form, but typically the higher the bench, the better your glute activation is going to be. One more tip for this is if you're having a hard time feeling your glute activate, think about picking up the forward foot just ever so slightly before you start each rep. You can kind of see it in this clip, and that just helps you remember to power through using that top foot and not the bottom foot. It's a good little reset before doing that rep, so try that out and see how it feels. The second to last part of this workout are some machine abductions. I know that it gets kind of confusing distinguishing between adductions and abductions. Abductions, AB, is going outwards, and that works your outer glutes, helps get that nice round peach booty that we're all after. But for this one, I personally like to either lean all the way forward or lean all the way back. I find that I get the best activation that way. But again, try both ways, see what works for you. Different things work for different people. I like to go moderately heavy on these, but only do that if you really feel a good contraction. If you're not feeling a good contraction, keep the weight lighter until you're able to establish that mind-muscle connection on this exercise. It can be kind of tricky, so be patient and keep trying. But as you can see, I like to hold on to the weight stack and really think about just pivoting my knees around my hip joint. Instead of going out, I like to think of pivoting around. So that is one cue that I've found really helpful, and I think it's helped a few of you guys in the past as well. Again, for this one, I did 3 sets of 12 to 15, and I think on the last set, I actually went up to 20. Part of the workout are these Swiss ball triple threats, and these are killer for your glutes and hamstrings. I did 3 sets of 10 reps of each exercise, but do what you can, keep it challenging, but you might have to do fewer reps since it is very difficult. The first movement are these Swiss ball Nordic curls. These light up your hamstrings, and the key for these is really keeping your hips high, not letting that booty touch the ground. After that, you move on to some stiff leg glute bridges. So you want your heels on the ball, not your entire foot yet. And then after that, you're going to move to some full contact glute bridges. Put your entire foot on the ball. Both of these, you have more limited range of motion, but you should be getting some killer glute contraction, and your hamstrings should also still be on fire. So that is going to wrap up this workout. Please give it a like if you enjoyed it. Let me know what other workout videos and breakdowns you want to see. I also wanted to thank Emma for helping me film. I will link her Instagram down below. She has been awesome. And then I also wanted to thank ProSource again for sponsoring this video. You guys can get the resistance bands that I use in this one for 20% off with the code WOLD20 on their website, which again will be linked down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in video number 3.